Salutations guys, it's Sid with another ForThinker video. So ForThinker is all about big ideas, awesome technology, and crazy hair? At least that's what it is today. Anyways, I'm doing a new series called 8,000 Words, which is based on the articles that I've written in the past and future as well as the present, right? So that's what 1,000 Words is going to be about. So this week we're going to be talking about some of the phones. Phones. Last year we had a lot of unique phones that came out, and now it's 2016. So is it worth buying those phones, or is it worth waiting? That should be the critical question on your mind if you haven't already bought a phone, or if you just got off contract, or were just in the market for a new phone. Either way, let's get started. So interestingly enough, I still have my Nexus 5. My Nexus 5, I love it. It works well, especially with all of the OS updates and everything that Google has done. I really think it's a wonderful phone still. Now, of course, it was on a 2-year contract because about 2.5 years ago, it was still in fashion to have 2-year contracts. A lot has changed since then. T-Mobile came and they really kind of demolished the 2-year contract idea and instead said like, yo, let's just go like unlocked and let's just have like a plan where you can stay with us for as long as you want. If you don't want to stay with us, let's go. That's fine. And a lot of other carriers started picking that up. And in fact, I mean, look, here's how I think about it. Unlocked, that's great and everything. You don't have to sign a contract and you don't have to stick with a carrier, especially if they're not doing so well, if their service isn't that great for 2 years. I think that's wonderful. What I'm not cool with, though, is how a lot of carriers have now come up with crazy plans, and it's not just like one straightforward plan. It's like multiple AT&T Next and different kinds of weird plans and everything that just boggles my mind. Before I didn't usually have to go to like Best Buy or Costco or whatever and talk to the tech people there to figure out what kind of plans were there and what my options were. But especially for families now and stuff, it's just very confusing. But more than that, I feel like phones have gotten so much more interesting in the past 1 year. We can see that the definition of what a phone really is shifting, what a power user is shifting, and it's just changing, right? And we see like a lot of people, especially people like me, they're kind of like trying to slow down the process of trying to get rid of removable batteries and like expandable storage and everything, but I don't know, it seems like we're kind of on the losing side there. But I mean, of course, I had the Nexus 5 with the 16 gigabytes of storage, and 2.5 years ago, that was a-okay. I wasn't really thinking too much about expandable storage. I was thinking more about just getting rid of my HTC Evo 3D and just moving on and having a phone which was dependable for the foreseeable future and was pretty future-proof and would get regular OS updates. So on my mind, it wasn't really so much about like expandable storage and removable battery, but as time changed, I really see the need for those kinds of features in a phone. So a quick recap of the Nexus 5. The Nexus 5 still has like a really, I would say like mid-range for now. It works really well. It's a Snapdragon 800 processor. I think it has 2 gigabytes of RAM. And like I said before, the model that I have has 16 gigabytes of storage, internal storage, no expandable storage, no removable battery. I don't even remember what the battery size is. I'll put it in the link, all of the specs and everything, but you know, specs don't really matter in the long run. What really matters is how your phone works in the future, right? So what's working really well is the performance of the phone because of the regular OS updates, and Google's really on that and everything, so thank you guys for that. A shout out to Google for giving us regular OS updates and really being like on point about that. So performance is still pretty buttery smooth. The one place where I would say I see a bit of stutter every now and then is in games, but even that's not like too much. Asphalt 8 runs pretty smoothly, but occasionally you get some frame rate drops and everything, especially if you have like a lot of other applications that are open. So if you have a lot of other applications that are still in the memory and everything, you're going to notice two things. First of all, performance is going to go down slightly. And second, you're going to notice that if you have more than, I think, 3 or 4 applications open, if you try to go back, your phone is going to reload that. And that's because of the RAM and the processor. But I mean, overall, performance-wise, it's doing really, really well for a 2.5-year-old phone. Just give me a second here. By the way, this is a vegetarian shake smoothie juice thing that I made. I'm going on kind of a cleanse now because, winter and everything, not getting in all of that exercise that I usually love getting in. But this should help a bit, mitigate the complete making me feel really bad about my health and everything. No, it's not that bad. I mean, I'm still getting in a couple of runs per week. I have a a punching bag downstairs that I hammer at away for like about half an hour to 45 minutes per day, and that works really well. By the way, great stress reliever. Now let's get back on topic. What doesn't work so well? Battery life. The Nexus 5's battery life wasn't that great to begin with in the start, and it just hasn't gotten better over time. I really thought that OS updates would help that, but it didn't. What else doesn't work well is definitely the camera. The camera, it was okay to begin with. I saw an increase in performance with the OS updates, and that was nice. But compared to the newer phones out there, it hasn't held up very well. And another thing is the lack of expandable storage. And this is why I was talking about in the beginning that expandable storage and removable batteries are so important now, is because 16 gigabytes isn't really enough, especially with like the OS updates and the apps that are on the market right now. Play Store, sorry. By the way, if you haven't checked out the new Play Store, you should definitely check that out. It's pretty cool. I think that this is the best Play Store update yet. But yeah, anyways, expandable storage would have been really nice, and 16 gigabytes are not cutting it. So that's what's not working so well. Everything else, it's pretty good. I mean, it's manageable, okay? So what I think is really key for me in trying to find my next phone, because I'm off of my contract, as I said before, is really finding a phone that balances performance, balances battery life, has a really nice camera, and has expandable storage. So I know there are a couple of phones out there right now, and I'll discuss those. But first, let me discuss, just in general, some of the phones that came out in 2015. And then we'll get into the big question or issue, which is why I'm not upgrading my Nexus 5 yet. So, just give me a second here. Okay, so let's start out with the Galaxy S6. So it was definitely a crucial moment for Samsung, right? Because we see them shift their focus from power users to aesthetically pleasing people who really care about design and everything, with the glass panels, front and back, and metal edges and everything. So we see them focusing more on the second group of people, which I guess it makes sense in the fact that their Samsung Galaxy S5 did not work so well because they thought, okay, let's just keep on going with expandable storage, removable backs, and removable batteries and everything. And I think what they missed was that their user interface, their Samsung TouchWiz user interface. That's the word I was searching for, TouchWiz. that wasn't so great. And I feel like it was gimmicky, it was buggy, and it just slowed the whole phone down. And I feel like that's the main reason why the Samsung Galaxy S5 wasn't a success. So trying to balance that aesthetic value with and still maintaining expandable storage and battery would have worked really well for Samsung. And I feel like that's what a lot of consumers were searching for in the Samsung Galaxy S5. The Samsung Galaxy S5, I feel like the main reason that did not work is because, yes, you had expandable storage, yes, you had like the removable back and the battery and everything, but it just was an ugly phone, man. It the touch was user interface did not work well. It was buggy, it was gimmicky, and I feel like that's the main reason why consumers didn't really buy that phone, is because they were like, tone it down a bit, Samsung. I mean, what are you on? And that's the main reason that phone didn't work so well. But I mean, Samsung didn't really have to do like a full 180. Changing up that back material from faux leather to something a little better would have been nice. But I mean, we've seen other companies like OnePlus have like a pretty okay premium back, at least a feeling back, and still maintaining like a removable back. So Samsung could have definitely done that and maintained their grip on power users. And if they did that, I mean, given that their camera is on point, given that their TouchWiz user interface has been toned down quite a bit since the Samsung Galaxy S5. Samsung Galaxy S6 TouchWiz user interface looks actually pretty nice. It's one of my favorites now. And doing that would have made it like my top contender for this year, but they didn't do that. No, they instead went for the almost Apple route. And I'm not sure that was a good decision, right? Because if you think about it, iPhone users, iPhone users, they will stick with the Apple ecosystem, not only because the Apple ecosystem is like where all of their apps are, but it's also because it works. It just works, right? The reason a lot of Android users stick with Android is because of the customizability and everything, the customization, the fact that you can express yourself however you want to. But Apple users, the iPhone users, they don't have that. And I feel like at this point they've been so desensitized to it that they don't care anymore. They don't need that. So they're not going to jump ship from the iPhone to Samsung just because Samsung added the so wonderful looking glass back and everything. And instead what Samsung has done is that they've lost their grip on the power users. The power users search elsewhere for phones. And that's why Samsung didn't have a great year this year. Which brings me to the Samsung Galaxy S7. Where is that going to go? Who knows? Rumors have been that they're going to bring back expandable storage, which would be really, really nice. That would be great. That would be a step, actually. That would just be one step. But, that might be enough for me to just change. That might be enough for me to switch to the Samsung Galaxy S7. But there's one more thing that Samsung needs to focus on, and that's the battery life. I mean, it was miserable, the Samsung Galaxy S6 battery life. And yes, I understand why they did it. Because they wanted to maintain the thin profile of the phone. But again, you don't have to compromise all that way, Samsung. So that's that. All right. So what do we have next? We have the HTC One M9. All right, let me tell you why the HTC One M9 did not work. It's because of camera. Megapixels aren't everything, and yes, I know you're trying to fix the mistakes of your past with the ultra pixel and everything, but this was not the way to do it, HTC. No, it seemed rushed. 21 megapixels sounds great, but if you don't have a good sensor, if you don't fix your camera app or whatever, the image processing, whatever went wrong in that, then there's not a lot you can do. And I mean, especially because nowadays No one's carrying a DSLR anymore. They're just carrying their smartphones, and that's all they need. And they want like Instagram worthy, Facebook worthy, and shareable to everyone worthy photos from their smartphones. If you don't get that part right, you're going to not have a successful phone. And I mean, other than that, HTC, I feel like their design, even though it's metal and everything, has kind of become a little stagnated. They need to change it up just a little bit. I don't know exactly what they have to do. Perhaps if they changed the form factor a little bit and made it definitely start by getting rid of that HTC logo at the bottom. Maintain the boom sound speakers. Those are signature. That's what you need. Don't go the route of the A9, I think the phone was, HTC A9. Don't go the route of that and get rid of the boom sound speakers and try to look like an iPhone, because that won't work. And yeah, that's all HTC has to work on really is number one, camera. Number two, changing up the design just that little bit to keep it from looking stagnated. Because it looks very similar to the One M8, and the One M8 looked very similar to the One M7, right? So changing that up might work really well for HTC, and who knows, if they get those things right, improve the battery just a little bit more. They already have expandable storage, so great job for that, HTC. Who knows, maybe 2016 will be the year where HTC makes a comeback, and that would make me very happy. Although, I don't know, I'm feeling just a tinge of regret with the HTC Evo 3D that I had. And the main reason for that was because of OS updates, right? HTC didn't really keep that up. They didn't keep it for the whole 2 years. They just had it for about a year of regular OS updates, and that was it. It just went from gingerbread to ice cream sandwich. That's it. So I know that HTC has said in the past that they were going to work on that with their newer phones and everything, and from people that I've talked with, they really have improved on that. But, fool me once. So anyways, on to the next phone, OnePlus 2. This just makes me so upset, because OnePlus really had it going. They were on to something with the OnePlus One. Oh my god. Because, it's like one of those stories, like David versus Goliath in the startup version. But, I mean, you think about phones and the manufacturers and it being like a crowded market, right? And trying to enter that market, especially now when Apple's there, Samsung's there, and they're like taking up most of the market share. HTC, all of these other manufacturers are already there, and they've already been doing what they've been doing for several years now. And then you have a startup that, against all odds, succeeds with their OnePlus One, and that's a great story. But it just goes as far as, well, how long can you maintain that? And I guess we saw this year how long OnePlus could maintain that, and the OnePlus 2, it just really blew it. I mean, okay, listen to me. This is what really upsets me, is because they said never settle, right? That was their slogan. That's what they're supposed to be about. And yes, they bring the fingerprint sensor, right? They bring USB Type-C. And they think that's all they can do, right? They improve the design a little, depending on the person you talk to. Some people say they like the design of the OnePlus One better because you get to remove the whole back and you can change it up however you want, so it's almost like changing the whole material of the phone except for the screen, of course. And then other people are like, oh, no, I prefer it this way because you have the metal-ish edges, right? So depending on the person you talk to, people are like, oh, we love the design of the OnePlus 2, or no, not too great. But here's what really upsets me is NFC. That's one of the biggest things. NFC, the lack of it, especially when OnePlus 2 should have known that Android Pay is going to be coming like really soon. Apple Pay was already almost out, and people are already picking it up. And I mean, Google had already stated at the conference before, where they announced Android. What are we on? Android M, Android Marshmallow, and everything. So that was the Android M where they announced that. They said Android Pay is going to be like a highlight feature. We're going to bring that. We're making a real push for it and everything. And OnePlus goes along and says, okay, we don't care about NFC. Consumers don't care about it. Well, look, especially in America, we need NFC because we're going to use Android Pay. And by the way, I'm coming out with another video on this. Android Pay works pretty cool. I used it at Jamba Juice the other day. It was awesome. But I mean, if you're gonna say never settle with a subpar product, and you go ahead and you don't add NFC, which is a critical thing, especially for North American users and the upcoming OS updates for phones. And you're looking at, you're losing a lot of customers, especially in North America, in the United States. And I don't know why OnePlus would do that. And then they went along and they did it again with their other OnePlus X. But that's understandable because that's a really, really budget phone, right? What else did OnePlus kind of miss out on was, yes, you have the fingerprint sensor, but what else are you going to use it for? A lot of apps still don't support it yet, and it's totally at the mercy of the OS updates and making sure that the OnePlus gets like Android Marshmallow and everything. So at least at the start, the fingerprint sensor, all it was useful for was just unlocking the phone, which isn't terribly useful. At least Samsung with the Samsung Galaxy S6 made sure and got in the backs of app developers and stuff to make sure that the fingerprint sensor on that phone would be useful in various applications. But that didn't happen with the OnePlus 2. And also, the camera, again, the camera wasn't that great with the OnePlus 2, and yes, I understand that at this point in time you're looking at what's the difference? What's the small difference between the best of smartphones cameras and then subpar Android smartphone cameras? And OnePlus is just near the subpar Android cameras because the difference isn't too much. And then I feel like one of the big things is consumers could have done without things like the USB Type-C, and they could have let go of the fingerprint sensor kind of as long as you had the NFC. And also there's that thing, fast charging. They gave up fast charging, they gave up the removable battery, right? And there's no wireless charging either. So it kind of seems worse than the OnePlus 1. So that's why I'm not upgrading to the OnePlus 2. That's why I don't recommend it either. I feel given all these small minor quibbles, but they're not really minor, they're pretty major actually, if you think about it in the grand scheme of things. But I say minor quibbles in that they don't really have to change too much to make it a successful product, OnePlus. I feel like the OnePlus with the OnePlus 3 could really make a comeback in 2016, given user input. So the Nexus 5X and the Nexus 6P. Alright, so here's the thing. Nexus 5X, you're competing in the budget market, right? And that's a growing market right now. And we're seeing a lot of phones where the Moto X style, and also here's again OnePlus 2, where they're at the same price bracket and they're competing. The Nexus 5X on the surface, it checks a lot of boxes, right? It checks fingerprint sensor. It has a really nice camera. In fact, it has the same sensor as the Nexus 6P. The only changes is that I don't think it can do slow motion as fast with the as fast of a frame rate as the Nexus 6P. And there's one more critical thing that's missing in its camera thing. Oh yeah, and the front-facing camera. It's 5 megapixels instead of 8 megapixels, but I mean, really, who cares about that? 5 megapixels is more than enough for selfies and stuff. But here's the thing, the design, right? I mean, it's kind of like a step backwards in the sense that LG, they made like a really almost, it was minimalist, but it felt nice in the hand, the Nexus 5, and then this Nexus 5X, depending on the person you ask, it kind of feels kind of really plasticky. And I never thought that Google would really allow an LG to compromise on something like that. Because I understand, yes, you're going for the budget market, but you don't have to make it seem less than it actually is, right? With the design, because inside it's packing pretty nice specs, from what I can garner. But I mean, here's another thing. Going back to this market of smartphones at the budget price, the competition is so fierce, and if you can give up that fingerprint sensor at this price bracket, you're looking, if you can, and if you're in the market for a really budget smartphone, you really shouldn't be too afraid of giving the fingerprint sensor up, because that's largely not, it doesn't matter in the long run. You can still use, like I did at Jamba Juice, you can still use like Android Pay with just like a password or a pattern password. So you can give up the fingerprint sensor. But you get like phones like Moto X Style, which is admittedly a better phone in the sense that it has expandable storage. It doesn't have removable back, but it has a pretty nice battery with a pretty nice battery life on that phone. And also, overall, the design just seems better. You can customize it however you want. In the sense that you have like a rubber back, you have leather backs, I think you have like a matte back or something, wood backs, and they just feel like really nice, and it feels like a really premium phone in the hand compared to the Nexus 5X, which doesn't seem that great in person. So I mean, and the camera also is pretty comparable. I mean, of course, the Nexus 5X, you're going to be getting a even better camera, but at this budget price, are you really looking for a spectacular camera, or are you looking for a pretty good enough camera where it would be good enough to take pictures for Facebook and Instagram worthy photos, which the Nexus in the Moto X Style does really good on. The dynamic range can be improved just a little bit more, but you know, at the price point, people. And it's cheaper than the Nexus 5X at its base price, too. So I would totally go for the Moto X Style instead of the Nexus 5X. I'm going to come back to the Nexus 6P, but because we're talking about it already, let's discuss the Moto X Style. What doesn't work about the Moto X Style? Unless you're a budget oriented consumer in the market for a budget phone, the Moto X Style loses its steam like pretty quickly. I mean, it's their flagship, but they're not really competing with the heavy hitters of the year. They're missing the fingerprint sensor. They have a pretty okay camera, and the OS updates, right? So when Motorola was owned by Google, we saw that the Moto X's were getting regular OS updates, and like really fast, like almost as fast as the Nexus line. And this is why the Motorola phones, when they were bought by Google, or the Motorola line of phones when they were bought by Google was like one of my favorites. It was like the underdog, but I really thought that they could come to be a market leader of phones. But then they got bought by Lenovo, and we noticed that a lot of the Motorola phones of 2014 aren't even being updated to Marshmallow, and that worries me like a lot. Because I mean, you have this flagship phone, but it's bringing me back like nightmares of the HTC Evo 3D, where I'm not sure if they're going to get like regular OS updates and like quickly enough. And I'm pretty sure Lenovo's to blame for that. A bigger thing that the not LG Moto X style is losing out on though is the LED display that it used to have. Now the switch from the LED to LCD display was explained as being for the fact that LED displays tend to burn in after 1 or 2 years, as well as the fact that some LED displays tend to have like a yellowish tint to them. Now, here's the thing. Samsung was able to solve this, right? Yes, in the beginning, Samsung also had some of these issues. And, I mean, the Nexus 6P, as a solution, they used the Samsung displays. Now, you take the Moto X Pure or the Moto X style, and you consider that the Motorola software, one crucial aspect of it is dependent on the LED display, and that is the ambient display, or as Motorola calls it, the Moto display, right? What it is that it allows you to view your notifications by just simply picking up the phone, right? Or I think swiping over it as well works. Here's the thing though, it works well with an LED display because it has a black background, and so those pixels being an LED display, those are shut off. So you're saving on battery life, as well as at nighttime, it doesn't hurt your eyes as much. The switch to the LCD display, for that specific application, you're losing out on the battery life potential, and also you're losing out on the fact that at nighttime, if the whole display is on, because that's what's going to happen on an LCD display, regardless of whether you have like great colors like red or blue or just black, the panel's going to be on anyways. So you're losing out on that. So it's actually, a lot of users have said like it hurts at nighttime to just see the ambient display because the whole panel's on, and that makes sense. And so I understand that why Motorola did that, but you're losing out on battery life as well as also some of the vibrancy. LED displays are vibrant, they're saturated, and yes, LCD displays can be more color accurate and everything, but in the case of the Moto X Pure, I feel like the LCD panel isn't as top notch as something that you would see on something like the LG G4 or the LG V10. And I'm going to talk about those two phones as well. Instead, you get a display that's kind of dim sometimes. It's okay. It's okay in the color accuracy. It's an okay display, but for some reason it feels like a step back from last year's Moto X. Apart from the fact that, of course, you're getting the 4K display. Now, another thing with the Moto X Pure is like you're making these compromises and you're paying a pretty good price, right? So for most people, it should be okay. But for the normal consumer, I can't see why going for the Moto X style would be a great choice to make. Because you're losing out on that fingerprint sensor and you're making some other compromises as well. So let's talk about the next phone. And that is the Nexus 6P by Huawei. Let me just say off the bat that I think that the decision to use Huawei was amazing. Huawei has been known internationally as making premium feeling devices, and the Nexus 6P is no exception. And I love that Huawei is coming into the US market, entering this crowded market, admittedly, but more options are good for the consumer. That's what I always want you to remember. More options is good. And so Huawei's entering this market, and they've made a very successful phone. Great critics, great reviews by most critics, and that's wonderful. Here's the thing, though. My issue is not so much with the hardware as it is with the software. Now, the hardware, it's a pretty big phone. It's a very large display. It's bigger than the Nexus 5X. It's bigger than the Nexus 5, obviously. It's not as big as the Nexus 6, but it is, it's a pretty substantial device. Here's the thing, though. The software does not take advantage of it. Now, this is Google's fault. Whereas Samsung is actually on the other end of the pole in the fact that they make so many gimmicky things, usually. They've been known to make gimmicky software editions. One thing pops in my mind is the Samsung Galaxy S4, when you could just scroll the screen by just using your eyes. In theory, that sounds great. In practice, not so much. But I mean, Google, on the other hand, is like, we don't want to do anything unique. And I think I understand why they're doing that. I think it's to reduce fragmentation and to make the OS compatible with more and more devices, right? That makes sense. But the fact that, you have a camera on the Nexus 6P and the 5X, but the 5X you consider a budget-friendly device, right? So you're not expecting too much from it. But the Nexus 6P, you have a camera that originally was meant to be on a digital camera, right? But then that didn't pan out, so they put the lens and the module into the Nexus 6P, which in my mind is really great. It shows you how technology can be applied into different applications. But you get this device, and the software just isn't up to par. I mean, there's no pro mode. There's the video mode is like it's all very bare bones. And I understand that that's what many users need, right? They just need an auto mode, and that they're good to go. And HDR plus, that's fine. But for a lot of consumers nowadays, especially when Samsung's coming out with these things, especially when LG's coming out with these things, it really hurts that the Nexus 6P doesn't have it. I'm also taking into consideration that there are third-party apps, but that's not an excuse, right? So that's one thing about the Nexus 6P, and that's only the camera that I'm talking about. Another thing, consider that there's no multi-window mode. It's a big phone. You can take advantage of it. The hardware can take advantage of that. It has 3 gigabytes of RAM. So things like that. The software isn't taking advantage of the Nexus 6P. And interestingly enough, we can see this also happening in the Pixel C. Many reviews are saying that great hardware, but software, not so much, because the software doesn't take advantage of that big display and everything. And you can just see how these things tend to accumulate. And it's a problem with the company. But it's okay. And so, that's why I'm not going for the Nexus 6P, is because of the software. Next up is the iPhone success. Now, the iPhone, by all considerations, it's a pretty good device. I don't go for the Apple iPhone too much because I'm so into the Android ecosystem. You understand that, when you buy a lot of apps and you've just spent a lot of time reviewing these devices, you've spent a lot of time getting it together on this one ecosystem, that's hard to shift to another ecosystem. That's not to say that I haven't used iOS. I have. And I think I love it. I love the simplicity of it. I think it's great for a lot of consumers, but I myself prefer the customization that you get with the Nexus line, or not Nexus, but with Android. With Android devices in general, you get a lot more customization and stuff. But it depends on the consumer, and either way, I love that there are those options. Here's the thing, though. And I love also the end-to-end integration. Wonderful thing, works well on the MacBooks, works well on almost every Apple product, that end-to-end integration. The fact that same person's controlling, or same company, not person, no more Steve Jobs anymore. Rip. But the same company is controlling the hardware and the software, right? So I like that idea. I think that Google's adopting that now slowly. Here's the thing though, with the iPhone success, you're getting 3D touch. And that's a very cool idea that depending on the pressure that I'm putting on the phone, that different actions can happen. And I think the implementation, similar implementation, the Force Touch on the MacBook Pro it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool in theory. But just like the MacBook line with the Force Touch, 3D Touch, I just don't see a lot of app developers taking advantage of it. I think that's the potential for that is limitless. I think it's very cool in like first-person shooter games that if you press a little bit more harder on the device, on the display, that it'll fire faster and the gun will fire faster in a first-person shooter game. Or for instance, in a racing game, for instance, if you press the display, the right side of the display a little bit harder, then maybe the steering wheel turns a little sharper to the right. That would be great. See, all of these things, it's just me, and developers have the time to think about this and everything. Here's my thing though, it's a first generation thing, right? So the technology isn't taken advantage of. The camera, yes, you're getting more megapixels, but the iPhone 6, you already had all of those great camera. So, I mean, just going to the iPhone success for that camera and spending that extra money doesn't make too much sense. So, and that brings up a bigger issue at hand, is that Apple used to be trend-setting, right? The MacBook Air, the iPod, the first iPhone, in all of these aspects, Apple set the trends. They pretty much like laid the layout for other manufacturers to come and like say like, okay, so we're gonna make our smartphone based off of like the ideas brought up by the iPhone, or even better is like the MacBook Air, because you can see all these Ultrabooks just pretty much like shamelessly stealing ideas that they saw that came in the MacBook Air in the form factor and everything, right? It seems like now Apple's not setting the trends anymore, they're following it. You can see that first with like the compromise that with the iPhone 5, where it was a bigger screen size, and that was okay, that makes sense, right? That users need a bigger screen. But then it got even bigger with the Nexus 6, iPhone 6. And then also you see them compromising now on, well, maybe users need more megapixels on their camera rather than a revolutionary better camera module. You need better low light performance. I feel like that's a bigger concern at hand here, as well as battery life. Don't follow things that don't work. Just don't go for just thinness, Apple. I mean, the iPhone 5 was thin enough as it was. It would have been nicer if you came up with a bigger battery, and I'm not talking about the battery case that looks like the iPhone swallowed like an iPhone 1 or an iPod or something. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a bigger battery inside the phone. That would have been nice to have. So, I mean, you just see that Apple's kind of like compromising now and following the trends instead of setting them. So, for that reason, the iPhone success just doesn't make too much sense for me to join a bandwagon that's slowly losing its control. And then now, as I just said before, there were a couple of contenders for me, like big ones that I almost jumped to. Now, one of them was the Nexus 6P. The other one was the LG V10. Now, in the beginning of the year, we had the LG G4. It was a solid device, right? It had a great camera, almost on par with the Samsung, except a little less vibrant in the colors and everything. But depending on the person you ask, that's a good thing or a bad thing. And also, like, it had no fingerprint sensor. But the biggest problem with that device was its design, right? Yes, it had the leather back for a couple of them, but The one that many people got was the kind of like the plastic back that it looked like it was metal, but it wasn't. It felt like plastic, and also the sides were plastic. It just didn't feel good in the hand. And then it's like LG listened to consumers. They did that right. They decided to come out with the device, the LG V10, which seems like they understood the concerns of the consumers. They made like a stainless steel. Those edges and the sides of the phone are stainless steel, which feels nice in the hand. And the back, it's like Durskin, I think it's called. I'm not exactly sure what the material is, but it's more grippy. It feels more textured. It is more textured, rather. And it's durable. It's really nice, actually. So you see them listening to users on that we want a better material, we want a better design. It looks sexy, man. It's good. But with doing that, they didn't follow Samsung's route of let's leave the power users. No, they kept the removable battery and they kept the expandable storage, and that's good because you're keeping control of your power users and you're just opening the doors for new consumers, giving the consumers more choice. People who care about design, maybe they might like the LG V10, or maybe not, but at least more people will. And personally, I thought the LG G4 was kind of ugly. I think that this one looks pretty nice. Now, what's stopping me from buying this device? Let me tell you. It's the price. The price is not on point. It feels very expensive. It's almost as expensive as the Samsung Galaxy Note 5. And for the features that you're getting, what, you're just paying for the design? That doesn't make sense to pay all those extra bucks. And the UI. Let me say one thing. The UI has gotten better, but it's still a bit more bloated than I would like. It's definitely more bloated than TouchWiz, and you can definitely see that in like the settings and when you the menu bar and stuff, and also on the home screen, and you can tell that it's like a little bloated because at times the device will lag. And given that it's such it has like really powerful hardware, it's kind of disappointing to see that, right? Now I will say though that the LG's camera app, like Samsung's, it's on point. It looks great. It's well designed. It's like LG's fixing things as they're coming, and I hope they continue to do that. They continue to make their UI less bloated, more user friendly, and more light and more minimalistic. And the camera app, it has pro modes, it has auto modes and everything, so that's really great to see. But again, that price is just killer. I mean, if I want to pay that much, then I would just pay for like a Samsung Galaxy Note 5 or something. Because at least then you get like an S Pen, right? And you get a better battery life. My God, the Samsung Galaxy Note 5 really does get like the battery life right. It's not as good as previous Samsung Galaxy Note 5, not Note 5s, but Note lines, but it's still better than the Samsung Galaxy S6, and it lasts like a day and a half from many of the reports that I've seen, so that's pretty good. Again, though, no expandable storage, which, I mean, I don't know. In 2016, we could see it go either way. We could see more manufacturers bringing it back, like many rumors are stating that Samsung's bringing it back with the Samsung Galaxy S7, or maybe, manufacturers, even like LG or whatever, they're gonna be like, well, that's gone by the wayside. We're not gonna bring that back. So we'll just have to wait and see. I really sincerely hope that it comes back though, because that would make my day, man. That would really make my day. And I really hope that like Google fixes their software too. But that's for another video. Let's get back to the main question at hand. Why am I sticking with the Nexus 5? As I said before, performance is still really, really good. The camera app is not as well as I would like it. The camera is not, it doesn't hold up, but it's okay. I can live with that for a couple of months while I see other options. But here's the thing, storage. Storage is so hard to deal with on the Nexus 5. It's infuriating. 16 gigabytes is not enough in today's world for the iPhone or the Android phones, or even Windows Phone for that matter. App sizes are getting so big. It's hard to deal with. And I mean, I don't have any space for my songs. I barely have space for my photos and like videos. Forget about putting a movie on this. And I don't even have that many apps. It's so strange. And I've tried like factory resetting, and that works for a bit, but it doesn't deal with the larger issue that 16 gigabytes is not enough. So what do? I use Clean Master. And I mean, it's hard, but I guess I could live with it for a couple of months. I don't know how long, I don't know if another 2 years, but this is why expandable storage is so important. And this is why this is like one of my number one things that I really want on my next phone. And I think that other people should have it too, because, I mean, sure, you could go to 32 gigabytes or 64 gigabytes, and you might think, okay, that's good for the next 2 years. But what if it isn't? Okay, because everyone thought that 8 gigabytes was okay like 4 years ago. Back then, 8 gigabytes was the standard. You go with 8 gigabytes, it was okay. And then that got pushed to 16. And I mean, I really did think that 16 gigabytes was more than enough. Because like when I had my 8 gigabyte phone, I didn't use up all of those 8 gigabytes. Most of my apps took up maybe 5 or 6. But it's weird because app sizes are getting bigger, right? And OS updates and everything. And this is why I actually like Apple's philosophy that they brought with tvOS, Apple TV OS, and is that the app, they're bringing the actual size of the app down, and forcing developers to comply with this. So I think like an app is maybe only 300 megabytes, so that's okay. But I don't know if Android's going to follow suit, or how long that would take. So expandable storage, you could, if you run out of your internal storage like quickly, you just switch to your external storage, and that could be up to like 128 gigabytes or whatever. And especially with the new Android Marshmallow update, you're able to take advantage of the external storage that you're putting in from like micro SD cards, right? Because Google or Android allows you to do that now. It treats it the same as internal storage, which is A in my book. And then finally is battery life. Battery life, as I said before, not good. Yeah, it doesn't get me through the whole day, even with like light to medium use. Heavy use, it's gone by half of the day, by like 2 p.m. So, not too good. But the way I've dealt with this was I got an external battery pack, and that solves the issue for me for most of the time. Unless I forget it at home, in which case, well, I guess I'm charging or trying to figure out somewhere to charge. But this is why like fast charging is so important, right? Because you plug it in for 15 minutes, it's good to go. Or a removable back with a removable battery rather. You flip in, you put in a new battery, and in fact, a removable battery is great because with a lot of phones, what you tend to have is that over time the battery degrades, right? Because overuse, it just happens. It's normal. You expect it to happen. So after 1 year or so, you're going to notice that your battery capacity, your charge lasts maybe like 80% of what it used to. And then that goes down to 60 by like 1 or 2 years, and then so on and so forth. But you have a removable battery, you just order a new battery on like Amazon or something, you plug that in, and it's good to go again. It's like fresh. Of course, you need to also figure that the OS, the software that the phone's running, might also have like a greater effect on the battery, so that could also affect battery performance, as well as like hardware. I know that on laptops, the fan inside, it not being cleaned regularly, or well, not regularly, you don't clean a fan regularly, but basically not cleaning it after a while, it tends to exert more more of a toll on your laptop, so that affects battery life. But things like that. But basically, an external battery definitely helps, or a removable battery definitely helps. All batteries are external. So yeah, but the point I'm getting at is that it's okay. I can live with it for a couple of months while I find a phone that I'm not compromising on. And this is key. You are the consumer. I'm a consumer too, just like you. We need to understand that the manufacturer shouldn't be dictating what it is that we need to buy. Whenever things don't go right, like for instance, gimmicks or whatever that don't seem right, we push back. We're like, no, this isn't right. And manufacturers listen. And that's how that control dynamic should be. We should have the control. Manufacturers should not be. And this is why manufacturers get hurt by devices that, well, after a while, if they're not listening, like this is exactly what's happening to HTC. With the HTC, their camera on the One M7 wasn't too good. And consumers, they complained about it. And HTC made the same mistake again. And the second time, their market share went down even further. And then the third time that happened, I mean, the One M9 sales haven't been good at all. And that's problematic for HTC, but you can see that dynamic there, that consumers don't really forgive easily. So the point is this: never compromise, right? Never. What is OnePlus is the phrase is evading me right now. I said it before. Never settle, right? Never settle. And yet, in 2015's phones, whatever phone you really go for, it seems that you really are settling on at least one aspect or another. And I feel like 2016 is going to be that year where things change on that front. That people are going to be realizing this, or rather manufacturers are going to be realizing this, and they're going to give us products that kind of give back some of that control, give back like that external storage, or the removable back, or a better design, without so many compromises. And that makes me happy, that makes me optimistic, and you know what, that would really make my day. So anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you for listening. If you want the articles that I wrote, I will put a link to those. I'm also working on my actual ForThinker website, the official one, so that'll be coming out soon, and I will post a link to that, or actually I'll make a video on that as soon as possible. In the meantime, thank you for listening. If you like this video, please like. If you want to subscribe, of course, please subscribe. That would make me super happy. When we get to 100 likes, or 100 subscribes, you're gonna get a special video from me. So that's all there is for today. Thank you, and I'll see you later.